I think sometimes obstacles are put in our way that we don't expect to have lessons learned. But I believe our life is full of obstacles for the intent of growth. And the growth that I experienced from that kick could not have been duplicated in any other way.
Thank you for being here. This is Beyond the Game. My name's Mike Lacey, and I am super grateful to reconnect with an old friend, Brent Johnson, who was a kicker. And I saw 1979 was your senior year.
Correct.
But you were, did you play freshman at BYU? Did you play the 4 years at
Yes.
BYU?
Yeah, I did. It was a journey to get to where I was by the time I was a senior. After graduating from high school, I had a opportunity to play at Utah State.
Really?
And I turned that down to go on my mission. And
Now, I saw that you served your mission in Northern California.
yeah, right in your hometown, in Rancho Cordova.
Yeah. Did you actually serve in Rancho Cordova?
Yeah, I served in Rancho Cordova.
Dang.
So you would have been junior high school or high school.
What year were you there?
72 to 74.
Wow. Yeah, I was 75 was my senior year at Cordova High School, the Lancers.
It was the Granger Lancers for me.
You were the Granger Lancers.
Yeah.
Dang, we have a lot of connections here.
So, yeah, so it was not, the opportunity was not there after I returned from my mission.
Wasn't there at Utah State?
Utah State. In fact, it was
Taken away.
It was taken away.
Good for us because we benefited from Brent Johnson for sure.
But I still had a desire.
Good.
And so I remember walking into the football office there at BYU, and Clara Hawley, the old secretary, Lavelle's secretary, informed me that the walk-on tryouts were in a few weeks, and that if I wanted to participate, I'd have to wait for that moment. It was different back then, for walk-ons.
This was 1970.
This was 75, the fall of 1975.
So that was my freshman year.
And so it was an interesting ordeal, and we could not, first of all, you had to be a student to try out, and the tryouts for the walk-on didn't happen until after school started. So those on scholarship and those who were in the program had been going, a few weeks at that point. And so there were a number of hopefuls that showed up that day for the tryouts.
Other kickers, or were you the only kicker?
No, at that point, I did not kick. And so that'll be the rest of the story.
Well, that's interesting because I saw in high school you were a linebacker, and did you say a tight end?
Tight end, yeah.
Okay.
And so I was trying out as a wide receiver, and that's
You're a tall wide receiver. Were you 6'3"?
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
Back then, most of our wide receivers were around 6 foot, 6'1". I don't know. Some of them got.
Yeah, I'd lost quite a bit of weight, on my mission, which was fine, but I still wanted to play, and so we walked on and went through that process. And unfortunately for me, I continued to make the cuts, and it went one cut, then another cut, then another cut. Then finally, there were a group of us that were invited to stay. And and at that point, walk-ons, we weren't given anything except for, helmet and pads. And
so Floyd Johnson didn't give you any shoes? Or
no, Floyd.
You had to get your own equipment.
Everything was.
Wow.
So it was very different.
And so I was playing JV with you.
Yeah.
So I remember we had to get a tetanus shot to play before the Dixie game.
we played in the.
Because we played on a.
It was a rodeo ground. Rodeo,
Right.
Yeah, and
Mark Wilson was our quarterback, right?
In fact, about a year ago, I was in St. George on business, on work, and Mark and I had reconnected after several years, and I took a picture of that rodeo ground, and and today's technology, I emailed or texted to Mark, showing the chutes, and
Where the cattle would run down
Yeah.
the chute to get onto the rodeo.
so
grounds.
it was great. But the thing that really happened after the JV season, there was a final cut from those walk-ons that weren't needed because we weren't, I guess, filling a JV team, a JV squad, and it was the moment of truth, and we were told that there would be another cut, and there would only be a few that would proceed.
Really?
So, and we couldn't participate in training table. We couldn't, there was no financial
The
aid.
world has changed, hasn't it? Because I'm surprised that the walk-on.
Yeah, preferred walk-on now.
Yeah,
So,
it was such a different deal in your day.
Oh, yeah. It was like we couldn't do anything. We couldn't. Anyways, so that day came, and I went to my locker, and they said that you would know by if you had equipment in your locker. So I went into the the old locker room and
Where you had the double panel.
doors, and you put your number in, and
That's right.
and waiting to get your clean clothes or your bag or whatever, and my locker was empty.
Oh my!
And so that meant that
That was your answer.
that was my answer,
that time.
and my end. I'd come to the end of my run. So very dejectedly went out, and I didn't see anybody.
And what month was this?
This would have been like October, end of October, roughly.
So it was after the JV season.
Yeah, we only had, Mike, I think 4 or 5 games.
Yeah, I think we played Ricks and Snow and Dixie. I forget who else.
Yeah, and I can't remember who else. So my locker was empty. It meant that it was over.
It was over.
So I was walking through the parking lot, and I was going down those of you, it's changed now. It's where the student athletic building is. There was a chain link fence there, and I was walking along the chain link fence going to the parking lot of my car. And around the corner on the far west end, Norm Chow came around the corner. And at that point, my emotions were pretty raw and to the surface. And Coach Chow came around the corner, and he goes, where you going? And I said, well, I'm going home. He goes, what's going on? And he said, well, my locker was empty, so I was going home. And I remember Coach Chow put his arm around me, and he says, oh, no, Johns. No, that Polynesian act, no Johns.
No Jones.
There's been a mistake,
Really?
and you made it.
Wow. I'm sure glad he caught you.
So we
Was
turned,
that happenstance, or was he waiting for you?
he was coming from the parking lot somewhere, and so we just happened to cross paths. So we went, we walked in together and went into Floyd's office and his little cubicle, and Coach Chow said, hey, Brent needs his stuff. And he had noticed, they all noticed, there was a mistake. So I made it. So I went out to practice that day, and things continued, and
Everything was
everything was
okay.
fine. And then fast forward to the next year, I still was a walk-on. I hadn't, received that golden apple of a scholarship. And
Were you suiting up for any of the varsity games?
no,
Okay.
if I remember right, I'd have to test this, but I don't think at that point walk-ons could.
Okay. Interesting.
I believe. I'm not sure of that, but I wasn't. So I watched,
Sure.
from the stands and the games. But the next year came, and I don't know if you remember Dave Taylor.
Of course I do.
So Dave
He
Taylor,
was a really unique guy. He was in my class.
yeah,
Scholarship athlete, place kicker from the South somewhere.
Georgia.
Georgia. Yeah.
yeah. And so if I remember right, Mark Usselman, who was kicking,
Yeah.
something happened. He got hurt. And so Dave had to, he was called up to kick varsity. And we had a couple JV games left. And Coach Chow and Coach Olson, they were, well, we need a kicker. And I said, well, I'll kick.
Had you done any place kicking?
Nothing. I mean,
Not in high school.
In high school, I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I did kickoffs and extra points and field goals in high school.
Wow.
And so there was a little tryout, as he was going to be the kicker for the next few games.
And this was 1975.
This would be 76 now.
76. Okay.
Yeah, 76. And so we had a little tryout, and I remember there were several guys that said, I can kick, we'll kick. We went back and forth, and extra point, I put a couple extra points through. And Coach Chow, I remember him saying, move it back, move it back.
Oh.
So I moved back, and I put a couple more, and he goes, okay.
You're not just kicking off a place. You're having it snapped and held.
in the whole process.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, Coach Chow goes, okay, John, you're the kicker. You're the kicker.
Really?
And so that's the story of how I became. So a lot of people didn't realize that, I made the team as a receiver. And sometimes I wish I would have stayed right there.
But there's no pressure on kickers, though. It's such an easy spot, right?
No big deal.
No
big deal.
Let me share something with you. We interviewed Lee Johnson weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an interesting thing to me because here's a guy that went and played in the NFL,
For many, many years.
For many years. I think he has the longest tenure of any BYU grad playing in the NFL. And he humbly revealed, he said, I'm not the guy he said, if the game's on the line, I don't want to be shooting the free throw. And maybe punting is okay. Maybe the punter is the guy that you want to be.
But you're still on center stage.
I know. And so, I thought, man, here's a guy that went to the highest level and he didn't want to have that kind of heavy pressure.
Yeah.
When you think of the quarterbacks or the receivers at a tight point in the game. So, and I cannot imagine, because you place kickers, when you're kicking an extra point or a field goal and the game's on the line, I mean, it would, the field or the uprights would seem really narrow if I'm that kicker.
At times.
At times.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you're
it's
really
the
on
Grand
game,
Canyon. It's, I can throw a rock in the Grand Canyon. So that's how I became a kicker. And then at the end of that year, Dave Taylor, I believe, decided he wanted to go on a mission. And so at our end year interview.
And you're still talking 1976.
76.
And were you the varsity kicker in 1976?
No.
Okay.
I was just JV.
Okay.
I was just JV. And so it came to the following year. Now we're to 77.
7.
And
I'm on my mission. So 76 and 77.
Yeah. So you're on your mission.
Down in Central America.
And that's where things changed. I redshirted to work on kicking. And that's what I did.
Really?
And at the end,
who was your coach for special teams?
It was Gary Zahner.
Okay.
Remember Gary?
Yeah, I know. I don't remember when Gary came on, though.
He came on that year, 77, I believe.
I love Gary Zahner. He was one of the most.
He was there for four years, maybe.
Yeah.
And then he got an NFL job.
Right.
But he was special teams. In fact, I've got a picture of Clay Brown and myself with Gary just before the Holiday Bowl.
Really?
But I remember at the end of that year, I went in for my interview with Lavelle, and we were going over things, and the plan was to kick, and everything else went to the side, the receiving, everything.
No receiving.
And he said, "Oh yeah, by the way, starting winter semester, you'll be on full grant and aid."
How did that feel?
Oh man, it was like, manna from heaven. It was
A full grant aid is, we call it, a scholarship.
Scholarship.
You now are going to get paid room and board, tuition and fees.
That's correct.
Right?
Yeah. And so it took me a little while to get there, but then it happened, and now I'm a full-fledged card-carrying member of the team.
Card-carrying member of the team.
And scheduled for my junior year to be, the guy.
The lead kicker.
Yeah, the lead guy. So,
okay, so that fast forwards into 1978, and that was my redshirt year.
you just come home.
Back from my mission.
Yeah. And that was my first year. Unfortunately, I was water skiing 2 weeks before. 2-a-day started, and I did the Chinese splits, and I dislocated my hip.
Oh my!
And
Your
fractured
right hip or left foot?
my left hip, and fractured my femur.
You're kidding!
No.
I didn't know that.
I fell, and when I fell, I couldn't get in the boat.
Oh, gee.
And so,
broken femur. That's
so they towed me in. This is some of this stuff you can't make up, Mike.
no.
And so
they towed you in,
and they made a fireman's chair.
so you're just in so much pain.
Yeah, it was.
You wouldn't even let them drag you because these are big guys.
I couldn't straighten my leg out.
Okay.
My leg was in a seat. I couldn't straighten it. So they get me in this fireman's carry, and they carry me to the car, and they get me in the car and take me to Utah Valley Hospital. And it was there where they took x-rays and told me the severity of the injury. And that was a devastating blow, because the doctor said, he recognized a lot of the people that were there in the emergency room with me. And he said, well, the chances of you playing this year are 0 because of the injury. And being pretty much devastated, being told that I'd worked all the way up to that point. And the next morning, the phone rings at the hospital, and this voice on the other side says, "Brent, what is going on?" And it was Lavelle.
What is going on?
And so he came down to the hospital, and we chatted. And
Did he get mad at you for water skiing? No, come on.
maybe inside, but he never expressed
No,
it.
he's a gentleman.
Phenomenal man.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I was sidelined for a while, but I really believed that there was a divine signature in things that transpired. After 2-3 weeks, I was walking and no pain, no problem. Mike, it could not have happened any other way by my healing.
Okay.
There is no other medical explanation as to how fast I healed and how well I healed. I was then started putting weight on it. I started jogging within 2-3 weeks, and I started working out.
What month was this?
This was in September.
Okay.
So within
Who was the
within
kicker
4
for the team at the time?
So they had a tryout, and Bob Cattell. I don't know if you remember that
I
name.
remember that name, but
I
don't remember him.
Yeah, they had a tryout, and he was identified as who was going to kick. And it came time to go to Oregon. And so we went up to Oregon and played Oregon State in Corvallis, and it was raining. I traveled because I wasn't.
Really?
And so, but Bob was kicking. And then it came time the following game, I believe we played Arizona State. and we went to Arizona State. We may have had one in between there. And halfway through that game, it was halftime, and I remember Lavelle. I was there on the sidelines. I'd kicked. I had warmed up. I was ready to go.
So you had now been booting the ball.
Yeah.
No pain.
No, it was within about 4 or 5 weeks of that dislocation and fractured femur. And so at halftime, shortly after halftime, third quarter, there was a field goal that came up, and I remember Lavelle turning to me and says, "How are you feeling?" And I said, "I feel good. I feel really good." And I remember Lavelle turning to Prattley and to Marv and said, "What do you think?" And Prattley said, "He's ready to go." And so Lavelle turned, and it ended up being a field goal. And Lavelle turned to me and says, "Okay, Brent, go get it." And I went in and I kicked that, and it was my first points. After all those years, I finally scored.
Wow.
And then, the rest of that year.
This was in Oregon or at Oregon State.
This was at Arizona State.
Oh, Arizona. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, that's when they, they increased their stadium. It was over 75,000.
Oh.
That stadium seemed like
Sun
a one
Devil
forever.
Stadium.
Yeah.
And back then, Arizona State was strong.
The stuff. Yeah. So it was so that's how the whole story about
That's how you became the kicker.
Became the kicker and the little setback. But I continued working towards a certain goal, and then it happened, and then the rest was just mine. Is my job.
Well, that's a really good rest of the story.
Yeah.
So that all happened in 1978.
Yep. And that was the first year of the Holiday Bowl.
That's right. And we played Navy that year.
We did. Yep.
Kickers are quite often the leading scorers on teams. Were you?
That was my junior year, and so at that Holiday Bowl, being the first Holiday Bowl, I kicked a field goal to open the scoring for the Holiday Bowl, and so I scored the first points ever in the Holiday Bowl.
We are talking and the Holiday Bowl is one of the top bowls in the bowl season, and you scored the first points in Holiday Bowl history.
Yeah.
I love that.
So it was something, that's a record that'll never be beat.
No, you are right. And I think we shared another stat that was interesting. I think you're tied for the highest scorer in cumulative points in Holiday Bowl history.
Yep. Yeah. Still, I think that's still the case because I was able to play in two.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember. The Holiday Bowl against Navy was in the low 20s. The score, do you remember?
I don't remember.
But our Indiana game the next year was in the 30s.
Right.
So it was a high-scoring game, and I think you kicked quite a few field goals.
Yeah, there was 3 in that one, I believe, with extra points.
And always on the extra points. And my heavens, in 1979, we had an offense that was just going up and down the field, right? So you had your chance. I'm curious, were you 100% on your extra points?
There was one blocked.
Really?
Yeah, over in Colorado.
Whose fault was I'm kidding.
No, I won't. They just got through.
Yeah.
And it broke my consecutive record. I
remembered that you had a consecutive
I was
record.
up around 76, 77, around in there.
Consecutive extra points without a miss.
Yeah, and then I missed. So
it got blocked.
It got blocked. Well, yeah, it got blocked, but it still falls on me as a miss. So it broke that string.
Wow.
And then I picked it back up, and I think, I had the opportunity to score a lot because the offense they were lighting up the scoreboard.
Well, and it's fun that you say that because that was Doug Scoville's.
Coach Scoville.
We're going to light up the scoreboard.
He would do
like
that.
a pinball machine.
He would say that all the time. So I was I got, you know, I was able to tack on to every touchdown.
Yeah.
And
that's why, you know, the kicker is frequently one of your highest scoring.
And then with the field goals added onto that.
Sure.
So that senior year ended up, we had so many points in the first quarter. I mean, we scored, I think, the first 3 possessions. And I remember Mark Wilson coming off the field. I said, "What in the world?" And he goes, "Everybody's open. Everybody's open."
Are you talking about the San Diego State game?
Yeah.
Yeah, nationally televised game.
Everybody's open.
And we won 60-something. And it was a big game because San Diego State was right there in the hunt for the championship.
And we put the kibosh on that real quick.
That was so fun.
But Marion Dunn, he said, after the game, he came over, he says, "Congratulations, Brent." I said, "Well, thank you." He said, "No, congratulations." And I said, "For what?" And he said, "You became the leading scorer, the all-time scoring record in the West for a single season in the Western Athletic Conference."
Wow.
So that's been since, I think, broken or whatever. But to score the most points in the history of the Western Athletic
Conference
for a single season,
that's amazing.
So that was probably pretty cool. Knowing where I'd come from, knowing the journey and the obstacles that had come to get to that point was very, very satisfying.
I love that.
I was thrilled.
I love that Norm Chow was there to intercept the mistake, and that the next year or 2 years later, you're the leading scorer and break the record for the WAC conference in scoring.
It's surreal sometimes.
It's phenomenal.
And that it happened and the way it happened. The lead up to it, the anticipation.
Are you talking about the 1979
season?
Well, here we are. We have this unbelievable group of redshirts. We have a team that did fairly well in 1978. Coulda, shoulda won the Holiday Bowl against Navy. So we have a lot of anticipation going in to 1979.
For sure, yeah.
And tell me what your feelings were.
My feeling, along with everybody else, knew that we had a good team.
Yeah.
We knew that we were going to start with Texas A&M. I'm sure you remember that, Mike.
It's kind of in my memory, Brent. And again, I was the fortunate guy that was in the right place at the right time.
Let's go for 2.
And Mark Wilson is the guy who called for that. Well, he went to the sideline. The coaches called for going for 2. And then Mark overrode the coach's choice, Doug Scoville, then for the play. And so I was just the fortunate recipient of a wonderful quarterback and a wonderful offensive system. But yeah, we beat Texas A&M. And we were all anticipating that game from the get-go.
Yeah, that was the goal. I mean, that was our target. The goal was to beat them, but the target was we're going to Texas A&M.
Yeah.
And it was time for us to step up and show.
Make some noise.
Make some noise, show the country that, we had a good team.
We really had a good team.
And we did. We had an excellent team. And starting off with that win and Mark being able to play after having his appendix out 2 weeks earlier. I mean, there's some crazy things.
It's interesting, Brent, when you think about it, because we were just a good unified group of guys on a team.
There was no cliques, I don't think.
I don't think there were. There really weren't. But what's interesting to me is when you look back, and I think I'm looking back at 78, 79, 80, 81. So I'm looking at that group of years that had a lot of, but we had more than 20, I counted once, more than 24 of our teammates went on to play in the NFL.
That's a lot. That is a lot.
And a lot of them were on that 1979 team.
Yep. That's where they started. And it was great. It was a great opportunity. I think the recognition opened doors, opened scouts' eyes, and things started clicking. And so we were all excited for it to start and couldn't wait for it to happen.
And so tell me about the season, though.
I think the season went extremely well.
Yeah.
We continued to win, and we continued to win.
And we won pretty big.
And it was big numbers.
Yeah.
It wasn't just by a little bit. And I know Texas A&M was preseason, I think, in the top 5.
Yeah.
If
I've heard
top
4
10
or 16, but they were in the top
they were
ranking in the country. They had one of the top running backs in the country.
And we were nobody.
Yeah, we were brand new. No, we were nobody still.
But I think as the year went on, we realized that there were some really good things happening. And a lot of people rose to the occasion. And we just started winning. And it was a great feel.
We had a wonderful team. Like we said, a lot of guys went on to the NFL. We had wonderful coaching staff, wonderful coaching staff.
Yeah.
Many of those gentlemen either continued to succeed phenomenally. I think of Lavelle. He had so many opportunities to go beyond BYU,
Right.
chose to stay. And yet when you look at our offensive and defensive coordinators and position coaches, I mean, many of these guys, when you name them off, they were some of the best coaches in the country. And
The who's who.
they were the who's who.
Yeah.
How did we end up with such a great system back in 1970? And
Lavelle.
Yeah.
It was his coaching style. It was his, hire good people. I think it all was heading towards the Holiday Bowl.
It was.
Everything.
Do you remember what we were ranked?
We made it in the top 10.
Yeah, as I recall,
I think we were the
5 or
first.
6.
We were the first team in BYU history to break that top 10 and get into that top 5.
The
6.
rarefied air.
Yeah.
And yet BYU had never won a bowl game yet.
Never had. We wanted to win.
Yeah.
We wanted to win Lavelle's first bowl game. I mean, to get to a bowl game is one thing, but to win, I think is the goal, since we had 3 or 4 tries at that 3 times, and Fiesta Bowl they'd gone to, and just had never been able to punch the ticket for the win. And so I think we really wanted to focus and definitely win for us, for the school. But I think we wanted to give Lavelle his first bowl game.
And hence an undefeated season.
Right. Up to that point, first undefeated season, I think, in school history.
Would have been amazing.
And it would have been an amazing year. And then the bowl game happens.
So we're playing Indiana, right?
Yep.
I just remember as a player maybe feeling more pressure to win that game, and so, but we were winning.
Yeah. We were winning all the way through.
We kind of dominated the game.
Boy, statistically, I mean, it was no doubt.
It was almost the reverse of what happened a year later against SMU. SMU was dominating us statistically, and then we came back for the win. Let me reflect, correct my memory, if you will.
Oh, I'll try.
But I remember I was on some of the special teams that year, and we had a punt return going. And so Indiana had to punt. Our defense stopped them, and I forget what the score was, but we were in the lead, and it felt like we were comfortably in the lead. Our defense stopped Indiana, and so they were going to punt. And Gary Zahner had this cool, I remember it was a return right. So I forget who our receiver was. Could have been Bill Shefflin. I don't know who our punt returner was. But they punted and they shanked the ball.
Yep.
Usually, hey, great, we're going to get the ball in great field position. But we had this line of guys blocking over there. And I don't know who it was. And it's not their fault anyway.
Doesn't matter. Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Because he's been so successful, I'm going to say Andy Reid. The ball came down on Andy Reid's shoulder, and that makes it a live ball.
Yeah.
Indiana recovered, And then they went on and scored, and now we're in a tight ball game.
I think
right?
they returned it for a touchdown.
Wow. Okay.
I think
so
they
you
picked
remember
up,
that?
Yeah, they picked up the ball, and I believe they returned it for a touchdown.
Oh, I mean, so you go from great, the guy shanked his punt, to unbelievable. How could that turn of events happen? Do you remember that?
I do. And I remember one other critical one.
Tell me.
So they had to punt again, and our return guy fumbled it. I think it was like on the 3 or 4 yard line,
Oh, my heavens.
and set them up to score, and they scored. So that was 2 events back to back that gave them 14 points.
Wow. All right. In the past, I've talked about the importance of special teams. And it's interesting how in 1979 and 80, when you think of the SMU game, that Texas A&M game, block punt, the other things, Lee Johnson on, you may remember, the next year against SMU, kicking the onside kicks that were generally successful. Obviously, special teams played a big part, but this time in the negative.
Yeah.
1979. So they scored 2 touchdowns off of what we normally would call fluke plays. Shouldn't have happened.
Right. Yep. And that gave them momentum, and they got back in the game real
So
quick.
now they're in the game.
And I'm not sure if we both scored again at that point, but it eventually came down to where they were up by 1 point.
Even though we were dominating in statistics as far as yardage
Right.
and everything else,
Possession.
Indiana was ahead by a point.
Yeah.
So take me into this poignant moment in BYU's history, in Brent Johnson's life. Please share with us the rest of the story. Brent and I had a conversation yesterday on the phone, and the story he told me just touched my heart and took me right back to 1979.
You can get there real fast.
So I apologize that here these 2 old grown men are going to be crying on the set, but can you share with us?
Yeah, you bet.
What happened?
So we, they're driving, Mark's driving, everything's good. But
it's near the end of the game.
It's just seconds left.
Yeah. And we were, it almost felt like our offense was so strong in that goal that we almost could have, should have scored.
Yeah.
But,
And we, 38-37
yeah,
was the score. A few seconds left. We just ran out of real estate.
and time. We ran out of time.
And so it came time.
Was it 4th down, or were we choosing to kick?
It was 4th down.
Okay.
And Lavelle turned and said, "Okay,
It's your turn, Brent.
your turn, go get it." And I said, "Okay." So I went out. It was 27 yards. And so we get up, we lined up, and Indiana called timeout.
That Lee Corso. Come on. I mean,
what's up with
the
that?
TV guys don't need more advertising
and they
money.
thought they thought they were going to ice the kicker.
Yeah. Oh.
Well, during that timeout, several players, we were in our own little huddle.
You stayed out on the field.
Yeah, we stayed out on the field. And in fact, several years later, talking to Lavelle, we talked about the kick. And he said, Brent, I shouldn't have left you out there. I should have brought you to the sideline, and we should have just talked about something. And he said, but
water skiing.
Let's go water skiing.
Let's go water skiing this summer.
But that was an interesting conversation with Lavelle years later.
It is.
About how, but during that timeout, I had players that were right there saying, Brent, we are so going to make this.
I think you said Nick Ayer
patted
you.
Yeah, Nick Ayer came over.
And Nick Ayer is he like 6'8", 300? He's a giant man. Offensive right tackle.
And just, that little...
And a gentle spirit, good guy.
And he said, "Well, we got this." And I looked at him and said, "Yeah, we got this." He said, we got this. And so I knew.
We all knew you had this.
We'd have it. because of what I had done and the way I'd kicked for 2 years, I don't think there was a person in that stadium that thought I would miss that kick.
You're right.
So we lined up, and Mike Cronister, Bill Shefflin. Mike Cronister was the holder my junior year, and then Bill Shefflin was my holder the senior year with Regan Andrews as a snapper. Yep.
How'd that go? How'd the snap and hold
Snap
go?
everything. Well, we won't hold the suspense anymore. I missed.
You missed?
I missed, and
what happened?
I looked at the tape, afterwards, and looked, and the snap was good, the hold was good, there was no breakdown there, and as I kicked, trying to identify why I missed, it may have been too complacent. I think I was just too complacent. I thought, I'm going to make this
Too easy.
So I should have approached it as maybe a 45, 50-yard field goal with intent and direction. And you should kick that way no matter how far you are.
That's interesting.
So, and that was my theory, is that it didn't matter if it was a extra point or 50-yarder, I'm going to kick the same way. And I think it was just I was so relaxed. I was so in the moment of, I am going to win this game.
But now this young man, who's been the leading scorer, who had broken the WAC record for scoring, now the whole world comes tumbling in because the game's over.
It's over.
It's over.
And I think my initial reaction was I missed, because I looked and it was wide left. And it wasn't close. It was wide left.
Do you call that a shank?
Well, that's kind of a hook in golf.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Opposite of a slice.
Okay.
And so I stood there for a minute and I thought, I missed. And then the reality of the whole thing started to play out. I saw Indiana players jumping up and down and running all over the place. And then the biggest takeaway was I saw the teammates. And they weren't jumping and they weren't running around. And I took a deep breath. I thought, I let him down. I let him down. So I turned around and I started walking. And my head was down. And I knew where I had to go.
Where was that?
The locker room. And I didn't want to. I didn't want to talk to anybody. That visual memory is still very live today.
I can't imagine.
And I remember a hand grabbing my face mask. And I looked down, and it was, Lavelle had a ring. It was a cougar ring. And I looked down, and that hand on my face mask was Lavelle. And they lifted my head up. And he says, "You have nothing to be ashamed of." He said, "Let's walk off this field together." And so we did. Of course, he had obligations, to have the camera response or whatever.
Shake hands.
And I made my way to the locker room, which was probably the longest walk, I'd ever made in my life. And as we went into that tunnel, I'll call it, and got into the locker room, it was very somber. And Mike, I don't know if you remember.
I kind of do.
It is like a deafening silence.
Yeah.
And after each game,
We're all suffering with and for, and
everything that transpired,
yes,
from the block punt to the drop punt to what in the world just happened. And I think I was in shock, literally. And so as we sat down, there's always a prayer after every game. And it was a somber, environment. And I think the reality of the magnitude of that miss started to, press even harder. And after the Lavelle's talk and the prayer, then the doors are open for the media.
yeah,
And I happened to glance up, and the media were like a raging runaway herd of cattle, and they were going right for my cubicle.
they're
And
coming for blood.
oh man, it was almost scary. And I thought they're not turning. And so there were several of the media right in front of me, and it was compounded with just microphones sticking through people, and that's all I could see, and I couldn't see out of the cubicle. And everybody was asking the question, "Why'd you miss? Why'd you miss?" And in my back of my mind, I'm going, boy, if I had that answer, I'd tell you, because it wasn't in the plan. And I was rattled. I don't think I was giving solid answers.
Well, how could you?
And Mark and I,
Mark Wilson.
Usually, if we weren't right next to each other in the locker room, we weren't far apart. We became dear friends.
Best friends, yes.
Best friends.
And Mark is he's a brother. He's
oh
a
my
brother.
goodness. And he said, "Hey, why don't you leave him alone?"
He says this to the media people.
And they dispersed.
Really?
And so I caught my breath, and we got dressed, showered, and I looked down on the floor, and I was packing my stuff up, and there was a hat. And I should have brought that hat. That's one thing I still hold close to me. And it's a regular golf hat, ball cap, and it has Pepsi-Cola on the front. And I said, "Oh wow, that's a cool looking hat." One of those,
Media guys. People.
dropped a hat, and so I picked it up, and there was a business card in it. And I looked at it, and it said, "To Brent, number 2." And I didn't understand, I thought, well, somebody gave me a hat. And the business card was, I think it was Frank Alessio, President, Pepsi-Cola Bottling Company. So we dressed, and
You told me, though, it wasn't the hubbub because it was a somber locker room. Mark came to your defense.
right, yep.
But there was another coach, and when you told this story to me, it was so touching to me.
Yeah. So after everything kind of settled down, we're getting dressed. I kind of looked out into the locker room, and Coach Whittingham is coming towards me.
Now, let me interrupt you because Fred Whittingham, I think we've talked about it before on this podcast, but Fred was one of the most intimidating people associated with our football team. He was big. He was strong. You didn't cross him, He was genuine. He wasn't unfair, but he was a gladiator, a competitor to the max. And
Absolutely.
So, right? And so,
Yeah.
well, did you have any fears when Fred Whittingham's coming your direction?
I thought Fred was going to come and rip me,
Imagine. Yes.
and I wasn't even a linebacker. But I'd seen coaching going on. As a kicker, you get to
Sure.
walk around and watch different And so I knew Coach Whittingham, and I knew the way he coached, and I was concerned what he was going to say. Just a very tender moment.
Tell me.
And he knelt down in front of me.
Were you sitting?
I was sitting, and he knelt down, looked at me in the face, and he said, Brent, you have your wife, and you have your little daughter, and nothing else matters.
I don't know why that touches me.
And he stood up and he walked away. That was it. And so that was a very tender moment from the results of that. And then right behind that, President Oaks.
President of our university at the time, Dallin Oaks, now in the first presidency of the church, he approaches you.
He approaches me, and of course, out of respect, I stand up. And I remember him shaking my hand and then pulling me into him. And he put his arms around me and gave me a big hug. And he said, Brent, it'll be okay. It'll be okay. So locker room, tender moments. And then, of course, we get ready to go get on the bus. And my life has changed forever.
Tell me how.
I think sometimes obstacles are put in our way that we don't expect to have lessons learned. But I believe our life is full of obstacles for the intent of growth. And the growth that I experienced from that kick could not have been duplicated in any other way. How many are put in that position to learn from that? It's a very, very small group. And so what am I going to do with it? How am I going to rebound? I'm still known as the one who missed out in the world.
Well, you're right. However, you told me about a stake conference you attended. Can you share that with us, please?
So, not too many years ago.
Recently.
Yeah, maybe within the last, I'd have to think maybe 10 years, maybe 10. I go to stake conference, and the presiding authority at stake conference is President Oaks. And I didn't know whether to go up and approach him or just let things alone.
Sure.
And so I said, I'm going to go introduce myself and tell him hello. And I didn't expect what was going to happen at that point. And I said, President Oaks, and he turned around and he stuck out his hand and we shook hands. I said, I'd just like to say hello. And he looked at me he said, do I know you? And I said, well, President, the last time that we met or that we were together is that you embraced me and told me it would be okay. He said, oh, Brent, that was a bad night. And so we talked just a minute, and I said, I appreciate what you told me that night. And he said, what did I tell you? Kind of like, oh boy, what did I say? And the common theme of this whole thing, Mike, is that I told him, he told me it'd be okay. And all these years later, it's okay.
That's great.
What happened, and it's okay.
You know what, Brent, in life, every single person has disappointments, has frustrations, has failures. We all do, I assume.
Yeah, sure.
Yours happened in front of
a few thousand.
But Brent,
2,000.
I love that people like Lavelle people like Fred Whittingham, people like President Dallin-Oaks. They knew that you were suffering more than any of us.
My teammates, Mike.
No, but Brent, I am so grateful that you were our teammate, that you did what you did, and the fact that we miss a field goal here, that's nothing relative to Brent Johnson. Like Fred said, your family,
Yeah.
and the brotherhood that we've all had. You know,
There's nothing like an embrace from a former teammate 20, 30, 40 years later. And within minutes, seconds, those years pass.
that's right.
And it's right back if we were in our 20s again.
And yeah, what if we had an undefeated season? Great. We could all high five each other. But the connections we can make in our sorrows,
Yeah.
I think, are deeper. And so, Brent, thank you. I hate to say suffering for the because I know that feeling of replaying in your mind what coulda, shoulda been. But Brent, we love you, and your strengths and powers are so much more important than the one little
Hiccup.
So tell me, if you have any final thoughts for our podcast, what could you share, with our people? Because we've all suffered frustrations and loss.
I think we have to put our trust. I've had to put my trust in the undeviating source of my life, and that's the Savior. It's constant. And amidst everything that goes on in our life, that's the constant that I have. I've been blessed with a beautiful wife, with a wonderful companion that was there that night.
Yes.
And she went through it and since that time, we've been married 45 years now, 46 years. And she has been through every up and down that we've gone through. And through that process, we have 5 children. We have 16 grandchildren.
One of those 16 grandchildren is a well-recognized freshman on BYU's football team.
Absolutely. My buttons just popped.
You're not proud.
Yeah, Brent Johnson is an incoming freshman. And in the defensive coaching staff at BYU, he will be something
in the rotation.
Something to reckon with.
I love that.
Coming in, he graduated early, so he could be here for spring ball, which just got over. I was able to watch a practice with him, and oh my goodness, he's 6'4", 305 pounds now.
Wow. Are you gonna teach him how to kick?
As a backup. It has served well for me.
Absolutely.
But no, I'm thrilled for what he's experiencing. The coaching staff has been nothing but wonderful. He feels support. He feels loved. He feels he's home. And I'm excited to see what he does in the future.
I am too.
It'll be exciting. But I guess just my final thought is all we can expect is to put our best foot forward. And sometimes when we do, we miss. But we have to continue to put that best foot forward in everything we do.
And your life is a testimony that you have.
It'll work. It'll be okay, Mike.
Like President Oaks said, it'll be okay. And it has been. And thank you so much from the heartfelt Cooper fan and teammate. So many of us are with you 100% on that. Thank you for what you've done.
No, Mike, it's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Right.